This is the Nobel Podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight. All right, so we'll kick it off. Let's start with what's your name and where did you grow up?
Sure. So my name is Uday Sandhu. I was born in a small town in Punjab in India called Amritsar. As the seat of the Sikhism religion or Sikh religion. I was born there until I was there until I was 17, and then I moved to California with my parents.
What was the prompt for California?
It was the bands and their jobs. They are doctors, they're surgeons, and so they got some jobs in the Bay Area. So we ended up there.
That's awesome. So 17 years old, did you have to do high school or did you go straight to college?
I did the last 6 months of high school at San Mateo High School. And in those 6 months, I did 4 years of U.S. history and 4 years of some other thing that I had to do because they didn't line up exactly. I had the world history done, but I didn't have the U.S. history done, so I got it done. So I was in school from 6 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. every day.
What was the cultural shift like to join a senior year of American high school halfway through?
The culture shock starts even before. So I arrived on October 31st, which is Halloween. So you're getting off this plane with a bunch of travelers, and you got people at the airport with blood coming out of their chest, kind of thing.
Welcome to America.
Exactly. And that afternoon we went to the mall, and there were a lot more versions of that. And so I thought it was interesting and cool. Like it's they pick a day to be absolute. Take your imagination of a horror story and you just go with that.
Yeah.
And that was kind of cool. At the schools, once I started the school system, the teachers were super supportive and nice. I loved that. A lot more supportive than I were before. And a lot of the education was more pictographical. Like you actually experience what you're looking at. You see what you're looking at, not just reading a bunch of alphabets and letters.
So that's what it was like in India before.
Yeah, India was a good book this thick. Just go and memorize it.
Yeah.
That's it. And there was no solution. The other side of that, though, is that I learned calculus when I was in 7th grade.
Wow.
And here I learned it in 12th grade. And so I already knew all the stuff. And it was sort of, I'm the wise ass in the corner. And I didn't want to be that. I just happened to be that I knew the subjects because I'd done them before.
Yeah.
So in the calculus class, I focused on the U.S. history stuff instead, because that's what I had to catch up on.
I always like looking at childhood and seeing how people end up where they end up. So when you were a kid growing up in India, did you expect to become the investor board advisor you are now? Or was that like a pinball back and forth?
No, my destiny from the family was to be a surgeon. My entire family is surgeons, doctors of some kind. My wife is also a doctor, so that's how I solved that problem for my parents, kind of. But it was always to be a doctor, and specifically a cardiothoracic surgeon. Because it's one of the few muscles in the body that always moves, and you're operating on a moving muscle, which is hard to do. And I found that very fascinating. But I would have been 42 before I was done studying for it. All the residencies and post-residencies and all that stuff. And so that was sort of a driver for not doing it.
When did you know this? When you were 17?
No, I knew this when I was 19 when I was in college, and I had to do organic chemistry as a class, and I hated it.
So that pivot at 19, did this inspire a career in business?
It inspired a career in mathematics and finance. Finance is sort of an extension of mathematics. It's just numbers. So I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and there I was in the business program called Haas School of Business, top ranked school in the country.
Wonderful.
And they were really, this is just before the financial crisis of 2008. There were 3 paths. You do investment banking, accounting, or consulting. Accounting's too boring, consulting's too vague, and so I left banking. There was no choice. And so that's what I did. So I did 4 years of banking out of school, which now in hindsight was 3.5 years too long. I wasted that part of my life, and then I switched to being an early stage venture investor.
When you say it was a waste, I'm curious about that, because I know a lot of people who went into finance from when I went to business school. Some of them, a small minority, say they absolutely loved it, and the rest had a similar expression to you, but they also had it with a caveat. They hated it, but it made them able to do what they did next. So was it kind of a necessary part of your development?
It was necessary at that time to have at least a year's worth of experience. But this was during the crisis, so there was no option. There were no jobs out coming out of it. That's why I did 4 years. But the hindsight aspect is that if I'd done it for 6 months, I had all the skills I needed.
Interesting. And then where did you go again after that?
After that was an early stage venture investing. So I joined a seed stage fund that was about a $2.5 billion fund at that time on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park in the valley. And that one was trial by fire because the partner I worked for, he said, go figure it out. And that was the best training I could ever ask for, where I got to meet entrepreneurs, really interesting companies such as Dropcam, Shazam, a few other interesting companies after that. And did that for 2 years before I went to business school at Northwestern, at Kellogg's, I think it's called School of Management or something. So that was 6 years after undergrad.
So a major point, people looking to pivot into the more sexy investing side that you did.
I did it before. I had already done it before business school. And so post business school is a continuation of the same thing, but more in deep tech. So the work I did before business school was more generalist. So there were some B2B companies, some B2C companies. And it was basically, if you like the entrepreneur, you invest in them. But that was the thesis. There was nothing else beyond that. Post business school, I focused on more deep tech and deep science. So some crazy science coming out there. An example is a company called Foro Energy, which we had invested in. They do lasers for deep sea oil and gas exploration.
That's cool.
And the idea being that today, when a well's decommissioned, somebody's going to go dive all the way down and cut it by hand. And it's extremely dangerous, like 65% mortality rate for some of those workers. They paid a lot of money, but that's because they could die. And so this thing was meant to solve that problem. And as I remember this very clearly, as part of diligence, we went to this oil field in Bakersfield, California, where a bunch of those in the pumps, the look like this, they're all out there. So we go there and they had the overalls on, and then they put this, I think it was a hydrogen sulfide sensor or something. And I said, well, the sensor was cool, so we'll know when to run away. And the guy from Chevron says, no. If it goes off on you, it's to tell the others to run away from you.
That's awesome.
Because you already dead. That was a proper diligence visit for a venture investing that we made.
Let's go before. So how did you make the pivot from finance to investing? Because that's a major pivot a lot of people.
That is. So coming out of investment banking, most people do private equity or hedge funds. I didn't like that because that was more still looking at screens and looking at Excel models all day long, and that was a bit boring. But I also don't have it in me to be like you guys, like operators. I cannot be at one company either. Like, it has to be interesting enough to do multiple projects at the same time. So I got lucky that there was a company that we sold called, I think it was called Canesta. It was motion sensor technology that Microsoft bought from us. I forget for how much. And it ended up being in the Microsoft Connect, which was that motion sensor stuff people had in their houses. And it was funded by a venture investor. I think it was Brian Asher from Bedrock. No revenue, sold for X amount of money, and now it's in my house in bottom Xbox system. So that was a light bulb moment that in venture capital, you create something out of nothing, and it makes you excited and happy about what you do with your life. And so that's why I switched over.
So what was the best and the worst experience in that early experience you had with investing?
Some of the folks I got to work with were a bit douchey. And that was one of the principles I adopted afterwards, which was no douchebags.
No douchebags.
Just general rule. People I hire or people I work with, just such as you guys. Just no douchebags. The best experiences were, these are the companies I invested in. They were like Shazam is one of the leading companies in the world. Steve Jobs talking about them all the time. Every time he released an iPhone, it was number 7 always. Every time he released an iPhone, there was this image behind it with the apps. Yeah. It was always number 7 up there, which was really cool. And the company had 300 plus million daily active users at that time, which is crazy for a startup. So that was very, very exciting because you get to work with these crazy entrepreneurs who are doing very, very interesting things. This is their passion. This is their life. And all you do is support them.
So let's get to the MBA, phenomenal business school. Question that comes up a lot is, what's the point of an MBA if you're not looking to get the pedigree to go into finance or consulting with McKinsey or some such other thing? Do you recommend the MBA to people thinking about it right now? And if so, why?
If you're doing a full career switch, definitely. If you're doing what I did, then you look for special programs like the one I did, which was a 1-year program. So you skip the entire first year. You only do the second year because your undergrad is in finance or business or what have you. And so Kellogg is the only school among top 5 that has that program. Skips the whole year and skips half the fees and half the time, which is totally worth it for somebody who's done it before. And so the classmates I had were phenomenal. I still keep in touch with some of them. And that was worth the value, not going back to school.
When you compare it to what you actually did, boots on the ground, investing in finance, did you actually learn something, or was it worth the connections themselves?
In the case of Kellogg, it was just the connections.
Yeah. So fast forward to today, you are an investor, you're a board member. I asked you before, I think the numbers are you're invested in about 44 companies right
44 companies 45 as of today.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Let's go over a broad view. What kind of industries are you in?
So this firm invests only in AI and AI enabling companies. And so we look for companies that have a significant algorithmic science advantage across 7 main verticals. And those are healthcare, cybersecurity, foundational models, video gaming, largely around content, sustainability, enterprise software, and then public safety. And ZeroWise is part of public safety for us. We have 3 companies in that bucket so far.
Okay. When I asked you, I have trouble keeping one company in my head. So how do you keep however many companies in your head? How do you judge and rack and stack which one should be in your head? And then what metrics are most important for you at the highest level from an investor to keep track of?
So the companies we keep track of, there are 2 buckets. One is the ones doing well, and those are the set it and forget it sort of companies, such as ZeroWise again, where if you need help, you'll call me, and I don't need to bother with it. Then there's companies that need a little bit more handholding, and those can be a range of topics. Could be HR, could be strategy, could be finance, could be funding, for example. And so each one of those problems comes and goes. Right, there's a new round being raised, and they need some help with the fundraising deck, for example, or any of those things. So every 4 weeks, the companies I keep in mind change completely because of their individual situations, and that's what keeps us excited.
So okay, let's zoom in on the ones that struggle, because I always you never want to struggle, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do special with the ones that do struggle?
We figure out why it's struggling first, and then who's causing it to struggle. Whether it's an investor, whether it's the customer, it could be customer as well, or it could be certain employees that are.
So how do you do this? What does it actually look like concrete for you to drill in?
So it has to be in person. You meet the CEO or whoever the management team is. In this case, could be CEO or CFO. You go see them and you sit with them and ask them, tell me what the problem is. This is not a Zoom conversation to be had. Zoom is great, but not for this level of conversation. You sit with them and you spend hours on, tell me what happened, tell me what your recommendation is, and let's talk about what the board's going to do. And then I go poll the board separately and say, well, there are 5 board members. Each of them have a different view. Let's figure out what the situation is and how we resolve the situation. And then the end goal is to broker between them the final solution. And that's what we figure out.
Can you give me like a concrete one? No names, no company names.
Sure.
Like give me concrete. How does it look? How did it actually pan out?
So one of your other questions was around, tell me about a company that had something happen to them, something negative happen to them. So not in my current firm, but in my prior firm, there was a company where the CEO and the CSO, Chief Strategy Officer, were accused of harassment, sexual harassment, and this involved them watching certain things at the office that they were not supposed to watch. And we got this complaint. The board met and hired a third-party investigation agency. They came back to us, and I remember this clearly because I was on my honeymoon in Bologna in Italy, and there was a board call, and the investigative lawyers, they said, yeah, this stuff happened. And whatever they were accused of, this happened, and these are the dates that happened, and that's what the CEO and the CSO did. Well, then the board convened for a total of 10 minutes after that. How do we remove the CEO? How do we remove the CSO? And who's going to take the reins over the business? Mm-hmm. The removal decision took 30 seconds, of which 25 seconds was just the voting. Everybody saying, I, all that. The remaining time was spent on Okay, there's a head of sales, they can step into this role. There's a head of finance, they can step into a CFO role. Let's give them the reins and get them the power they need to make sure the company doesn't struggle, that employees don't struggle, that the customers don't struggle, and get going from there.
Did you already have them identified because you just kept track of who had talent, or did you have to do like an interview process?
One of them was an interview. One of them was they had left the company because they saw what was happening, and we had to get them back.
Interesting.
And that was an interesting conversation where it said, well, it was sort of a I told you so, effectively. There were some issues. And we had to talk to them about, look, this company you've spent the last 12 years at, with employees, you have not just a financial bond, but an emotional bond with the company. And the employees, everybody's asking for you to come back. So you should come back, and we'll give you the CEO role and you run with it.
I like that you took into account what the employees wanted. Did you have some sort of poll? Did you get boots on the ground, talk to the employees? How did that happen?
We didn't have to do a poll. I just had to sit in the conference room and just watch them and observe them.
Nice.
And the person they talk about most, like who would you like, the EAs or the heads of various departments, they're all right there outside, right? And you're in the conference room. You just hear people talk about certain people in a different light compared to other people, and you choose based on that.
I love it. Let's focus on founders a little bit, because a lot of people, I think, listening to this are going to be thinking about building their own companies or currently doing it, looking for investors. When you think about weighting people, because at the end of the day, you're investing in people, how do you compare, on one hand, the person you're going to invest in or the team, and then the idea itself? What does that process look like?
So the team is first and foremost. That's the most important piece, because you guys are the people who are doing the work. They're actually boots on ground. You have the most exciting and the hardest job in the world. I have the second one, so I'm behind you guys. With respect to the idea versus the team, well, the team comes first, the idea is second, and the market is third. And so it's a sequence we go down on. With respect to the idea, it has to have a big enough market, but it doesn't need to be $50 billion, right? It can be, of the $50 billion market, you're going after $5 billion today, but here's how you're going to own the $5 billion part. How are you going to get to 60%, 70% of the $5 billion part? And once we build a path for you, and then there's parallel to the revenue path is the funding path and the team growth path, and who needs to be upgraded on the team as you build that path. Once you have that mapped out, then we look to invest.
Okay.
And then the final part is, of course, asking the founders, why are you doing this? Why would you kill yourself to do this? I had this discussion with every one of my companies at this firm, and just to understand what their goal is. And if the goal is to buy a Ferrari, then we won't invest. But if the goal is to change the world in a manner they feel is the right thing to do, we'll invest in them.
I'm curious about the actual human elements. You talked about, you're in the room, you're watching the employees, you hear who they talk about, how they talk about them. When it comes down to vetting the potential founder or the potential leader, you do it face to face, and your travel
face to face. Yes,
your travel is through the roof.
Yeah.
So what do you do it over dinner? Do you do it over drinks? Do you do it in an office? Do you do it all three? And then what are you looking for? Just dig in.
So it's small social cues. That's what we care about. So it's about how they treat the lowest person on totem pole, whether it's a CEO, CFO, or what have you. That speaks to the culture, which is at the basic level, the humans working at this company need human respect. They're there to do a job. They're doing their best with their ability, and that allows the CEO to focus on other things and not HR. If the culture is stable, if the company is stable, then they can do bigger and grander things. So we start with the human side. We assess that by, as I said, sitting in a conference room, talking with the employees, going to lunches with them, going to dinners with them. Drinks, not so much. It doesn't need to go to drinks level, because we're not looking more salacious details. It's purely about who are you as a human, what things you like, things, your hobbies, passions, etc. And the hobbies and passions sometimes bring the Ferrari out, or their version of a Ferrari out. Like maybe somebody wants a yacht, for example. That's is not the goal for us. The goal is more about, yes, we are in the business of making money. We raise money from professional investors, and we are professional investors. But this is a step beyond the money aspect.
Have you had lessons learned where you invested in the yacht individual as opposed to the passion individual? And then how did that work out?
The yacht individual did okay as a return. The passion individuals are just doing better. And the passion individuals are folks who choose this life of hardship, who are doing this because they want to do it. And it's not an easy job. It's definitely not an easy job.
Do you find, I mean, just in the backgrounds, is there a similar background between the yacht people and the enjoying hardship people? Are you learning common backgrounds for this? Or is it literally just from sitting face to face with that person?
There can be common themes on what sort of chip they have on their shoulder. What do they want to prove? Whether it's internal, like family related or friends related, or it's something about, I want to show the world that I can do this, right? So it's almost to the point of being a maniac, maniacal behavior, but not over the line, right? Because you still need to have empathy. You need to connect with your people, your employees. You can't do it all on your own, right? You have 5 employees or 500 employees, doesn't matter. You have to empathize with the people who work with you, for you, and guide them to a certain path. And that's what leadership is all about.
Do you utilize personality tests? Have you ever thought about using like a Myers-Briggs or something like that?
I tried that before. They're not easy to game, but they also, people who fit my personality are definitely not people who I fully align with. So I didn't need to match exactly one to one. And then I think they're a bit too general. Because for this job, you also have to adapt, right? So there are 2 basic tenets that I look for. One is tenacity, which is the hardship aspect. You have to go through walls. Doesn't matter what wall it is. The second is ethos, which is about the why aspect of, if you're going to keep doing this to your life forever, why do you want to do it? And what's the goal for this? Right? For Zero Horizon mission, for example, if you want to go after the 120 million cameras in the country, that's the mission. Because at one point, you will be able to catch somebody in the act, right? And that's the ethos part. Why you guys bother in the first place, and that's what we look for.
How did you learn the skill of vetting an individual human being to see what they're going to be? It had to have been an iterative, intuitive process. How did you develop it?
It was a lot of mistakes,
Lots of
failure. I've been fortunate that across the 4 firms I've worked for, I've invested in over 100 companies by now across those 4 firms. The ratio of that means I met around maybe 4,000 companies to get to 100.
Wow.
Which means there's at least 7,000 to 8,000 pitch decks, other emails that came in that we did not like. And so every investor has their own version of this, but it's the experience leads you down this path, and the mistakes, the failures you do or make are drive all of the decisions you make in the future.
Did you have mentors along the way?
Yes, I definitely mentors along the way. Some were mentors as in, let me tell you what to do. Some were like the first guy I told you about who said, go figure it out. Yeah. And he's a mentor in his own right.
Fitfo.
Yeah. And so he taught me a lot about the business, but then the other mentors were more about, here are the guardrails. And you cannot cross guardrails on ethics, personal morals. You cannot say things that can cross certain lines that you don't want to cross. And those tended to be the elderly statesmen of the groups that I worked with, who've seen it all, and who and some of them were vets as well. So their learnings in the Air Force or Navy or what have you, and the ability to say, I'm comfortable with my skin. I'm not going to go outside of that.
I love it. When you're talking to someone who's interested in becoming an investor, let's say they did really well as an operator, or like you, they went from a finance to becoming an investor. What's the main advice you'd give them?
You need to be comfortable with the ability to connect with people. This is a people business. There's a lot of science behind this, no question, but the art component is not talked about enough, and it's much, much bigger. So it's the ability to believe in the entrepreneurs you're investing in, right? And believe in the vision they have. Because as my earlier point, you're making something out of nothing, and more times than not, you're going to fail. Like in the average venture fund today, a really good fund, about 70% of the companies are failures. Failures meaning 0 return or maybe 1x return, which is also a failure in their mind. There might be 5% companies that return the whole fund times 4 times 5. So you have to be comfortable with failure, comfortable with knowing that even if you believe in the person, something went wrong. The wrong market, the wrong time, et cetera, et cetera. Like, so there were some investments I made in manufacturing, and we think they were a little too early. And there were external factors such as COVID, leading to high interest rates, leading to lower investment by their tier one customers, which effectively hampered the companies. So those factors come into play, and you have to just be comfortable with that.
So when you look at being an investor, you went from finance. Do you see a value in having been an operator and becoming an investor versus going finance to investor? How do you look at that differential?
If you realize early on that the operator's job is harder than my job, and that you let that sink in, then you can go from finance to being an investor, an early stage venture. If you think that you're God and you can dictate the terms, then you're going to fail very quickly. And what I mean by this is this: there's few investors in the Valley, fresh out of business school, did some investment banking, some consulting, and what have you, and they're sitting on these boards and they're effectively ordering the founders to do what they want them to do, and they have no operating experience, no real world experience, and they're doing this. Those are the ones that will fail. So if you can't step back and realize that you are second, not first, then you need operating experience, because that tells you how hard it is to actually do the work. Right? For you do this every day. Like, fighting the fight every single day to move this up the mountain is extremely, extremely hard.
Yeah.
And I know it because I've seen you do it for the last 3.5 years I've been with you guys. And I realize how hard it is. So I'm just going to step back and just give you recommendations based on what I know, but not more than that. I won't order you to do something.
How did you develop that understanding, again, having gone from finance? Was this a lesson in failure, or just literally sitting back and just being an intent observer of what it's like to run a company?
Those two were part of it, but the third was the mentors, the elderly statesmen. One of them, he is 80 plus right now. He still goes to work because he loves the work that we do. But his point was, he literally told me this: you're not in control. It's the CEO's company. It's the management team's company. You're there purely to provide advice and to help them realize they're going towards something that you've seen before, and just nudge them over a little bit. But that's all you can do.
I keep going back to becoming the surgeon you were talking about, with 42 years old, finally being able to do it. You control almost everything. Sure, you can't control like the perfect outcome of the surgery, but you are the master of your hands in that operating room. And here you're just like kind of sitting back and saying, it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yes.
How do you?
So it's driven by my grandfather. He was a self-made man, and he passed about 7 years ago. And he taught me to be more about life's too short, don't worry about it. Right. And when he passed, that was the realization, because he was the first in the 2 generations up who passed. Before him, it was the great-grandfathers, our great-grandmothers who passed. So I was like, I have buffer. I have 2 people in front of me. I'm young. I can do what I want to do. But when he started going, then I realized it's just my parents and just me. And that was the push to just simply say, life's too short. Don't worry about it. Things will happen the way they're going to happen. So you have to be more at peace with the decisions you make. The decisions I made to invest in a company is a decision I made. I have to wait a long time for it to be fruitful. It's not a PE firm or a hedge fund. And all I can do is push the wheel forward with the company.
Was this the bit of wisdom that happened around that 19-year-old time frame?
No, it would be around 25. So after investment banking, so after that realization, I did it for too long. I wasted too much of my life on this stuff. And to give you concrete examples, there was this one project that I did about 2 months before I left. It was a project that needed 56 hours of continuous work with no sleep.
Why?
It was something that it was around an activist investor that was going after one of our clients in the business. And so the MD, the managing director, he said, I want to look at this activist investor and see what they've done before. So he gives this short task to the VP. The VP said, well, I want to present these 5 slides that have this data on that. And so I did all the work, right? That was the first 24 hours. And then I gave it to him and he goes, maybe let's change it a little bit this way. A little bit this way is all it took to go another, it was like 31 hours or so. And so I did the work, and I'm up on Red Bull. Like, I'm going constantly on Red Bull. And coffee doesn't work. Coffee is just water at that point. And keep going until the 56th hour mark where we gave it to the MD, and the MD goes, I never asked for this.
Oh,
And he never used it. It never went into production. And so when that happened, that was the starting of the life's too short. I don't want to do this. I'd rather do something where you make something out of it. And I was just serendipity that at that time I was talking to this one venture fund, the one I joined, where the guy who said, go figure it out was there. And so that's what I got after instead.
Let's bump into AI a little bit. So can you talk about what stages you like to invest in right now with your 45 companies, and then how you see the future of AI playing out?
Absolutely. So we invest mostly at the Series A or Series B level. So that's early product market fit of some kind. In not all cases, but most cases. And what that means is maybe $1 million or so of revenue, somewhere around that range. Or maybe you have 2 or 3 marquee customers, like tier 1 customers, and these are piloting the project, almost ready to sign a contract or some version of that. Series B just multiplies that by X of 5 or 10 based on the industry. The exceptions end up being companies like chip companies, where they have to do tape outs and it takes a lot of money to get to a chip, for example. So those are simple exceptions to this. We have invested in some seed companies. We've invested in some later stage companies. Seed companies usually end up being where it's just so obvious that we have to invest in this company. And that's our first public safety investment, for example. Or it's somebody we've worked with before who we know has the tenacity, has the ethos to go figure this out. Because at seed stage, it's a different battle. It's being in the bunker, being in the garage, being as scrappy as possible. And Series A, maybe you get a tiny office. Because Series B, maybe you get a bigger office. Yeah. But the scrappy part, putting through it, requires a lot of trust that you are actually going to do what you said you're going to do. And the history does matter in this case.
What about, so you're in the AI industry. How do you, is AI a tool, or is it going to destroy the world? What are your projections for AI?
I think it's a great augmentation tool. It takes legacy industries and automates this much or that much, and that alone is a ton of value. So if you're able to, like in the case of ZeroEyes, if you can watch 50,000 cameras with 5 people versus 10,000 people, that's the benefit of AI in this case, and being able to spot things quickly and spot things without making mistakes. A simple example of that is our company in radiology called AI Doc. What they started with was just catching mistakes, because radiologists, after the first couple hours on their shift, they'll miss bleeds that lead to patients dying or patients coming back and being readmitted or something else going wrong, because the cascading impact of a bleed that started. Bleed can lead to massive strokes or massive issues with the brain or anywhere else in the body. So that's where AI augmented. It's catching the mistakes, but it's not signing the note for them. It's not taking over their job. And radiology is a particularly good example of AI just being augmenting, because 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and today, when med students pick their specialties, they walk away from radiology because they think AI is going to eat up radiology. The radiologist specifically, it's going to augment their work. It's never going to replace the radiologist, because not just the rules of the government or the regulations as such, but it's the same concept as a plane can fly itself. You won't get on a plane without a pilot. So similar with medicine, you still need a physical doctor. You just make them better at their job. And that's what AI is doing.
How did you pick the 7 verticals that you focused on right now? I'm assuming there was a thought out rationale there.
There were, some of them were the big successes of Fund 1. We're on Fund 2 now. So big successes of Fund 1. Some of them we saw as the obvious strengths, such as foundational models and generative AI, which is, we saw it before the ChatGPT hype, and now it's obvious. Like everybody's going after that sector. But I'll explain what that means to us versus others in a second. And then the ones that are around, say, public safety, those are just necessary, need to be done. And it seems like we are one of the few venture funds actually cares to do that. So we're going to continue on that path as an effective passion project to make sure that we continue funding things that keep people safe.
Let's pivot to being a board member. So this is always the only board I've ever sat on for the past 6 years or however long it's been. You're on quite a few. So what is if you could articulate your philosophy of being a board member, how to be most effective, how do you set your intentions, how do you go about doing that?
So going back to an earlier point I made, even as a board member, yes, the management answers to the board, but the board is there to serve the shareholders, which includes the management. So it's a circular reference. So arguably, we work for the shareholders, which includes you, right? And we have to internalize that we are there to make sure the company does what it said it's going to do and doesn't fall off, as I mentioned earlier. The preparation for that, like a board meeting should not be a surprise. The board meeting is there because we need to have them so that everybody gets in the room and has an opinion and we make decisions on critical things that we need to talk about. But whatever's happening in the company, I should already know about it. Like the major strategy decision that coming up, whether it's a fundraise, whether it's firing somebody in the C-suite or hiring either or some other decision the company has to make. And at the board meeting, we are there to talk about what went right, what went wrong, how can we do better, and how can we help you do better. That's the last part, which is important because I'm not doing it, you're doing it.
So that is really just brilliance in the basics. There's not like an intense science to it, but I'm assuming behind what you're saying is a tremendous amount of intuition.
It's pattern recognition. It's a rudimentary version of machine learning, very rudimentary version of it, but it's this pattern recognition on, I saw that happen before, and you shouldn't do that.
You're talking about mentors. What's the best advice you have ever been given about being on a board?
Shut up and listen.
Okay. I could have saw that one coming. So rolling with that, what advice would you give to those new to boards besides shutting up and listening?
It's to really get to know the business because the board meets once a quarter and you're not there as a coffee and bagel board member. And every board I've been on, except for a few exceptions, including Zero Eyes, it is at least one person who's the coffee and bagel person. And they're there because they invited this board meeting and they like the coffee or the bagels that are shown, that are presented. That's it. That literally is why they come over. And they don't have anything to add to it. Don't be that person. Be the person who's proactive in talking to the team, regardless of the board meeting or not. Right? That's what I mean by knowing what's happening in the business. Have a good relationship that's at the human level and not just I'm the board member and you're the CEO or whatever role is. Because we're all peers. We're all here at the same journey. And you need to know that you're just one small cog in the machine. And that realization means that then you start working for the company and not for the board and just the board.
What are one or two of the most difficult moments you've had on these dozens of boards you've been on?
There was this one company where there 4 investor board members, and of the 4, one of them was always the inverse. Doesn't matter what decision it is.
The contrarian.
The contrarian. But the contrarian who does not listen to anybody else, who just wants to do his own thing. And his fund had invested in the series at the first round, so his strategies were different. He invested very early. And the other 3 were in similar valuations. I mean, it was additive fundings that came after that. So the other 3 had a different decision process, and this guy had a different decision process. And because he had negotiated some rights that gave him a veto power over decisions made by the board because it had to be unanimous as a decision, he sacked the company. The company went from $20 million of ARR to 18, to 17, to 15, to 5. And then we sold it for a song.
That's remarkable.
And the second issue was this guy, the first board member, was also personal friends with the CEO. So he didn't realize that the job of the board is to watch for shareholders. And if the CEO is not performing, then you have a different discussion with the CEO. So responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility comes into play there. And having a discussion with the CEO, like maybe you should step aside. Maybe you shouldn't have a head of sales or a president or pick your version of that. Is you need help, you're not getting there, and let us help you. But this guy would never agree to it, and so the board never could do it.
This reminds me of something that you hear in the military a lot. Reputation begins day one.
Yes.
So I wonder in the investor space, the board space, does that reputation follow you when you sink the company because you can't be objective? Like, can you articulate that?
Reputations can be broken in a heartbeat. So you have to be consistent with who you are as a person. And that's one of the mentors that we talked about earlier. It's the reputations are not made by Twitter or writing tweets, every 5 seconds about something you see on TechCrunch. because that doesn't make no sense. It's about how you help the entrepreneurs when things go sideways, right? And there's a company I have in Boston where the CEO is very kind because the company has 9 lives, let's say, and it's already used up 7 of the 9 lives at this point. And the CEO, and every time a conversation with him was, how do we make sure the employees are paid? Because the employees have no other place to go to. How do you make sure if you don't have money to pay them, if they're furloughed, how do I make sure you pay for the health insurance or whatever insurances they have? And then he turns around and goes, you're an old school VC. I was like, what does that mean? He goes, it used to be a time when the VCs cared about their employees. Now they don't. Now it's all about money. And so you have to make sure that you realize as a new board member, the people who are doing this work so that the board and the shareholders make money. And the people come first, and you can't forget. They're not exchangeable cogs in the machine.
What are 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 things you do in the morning to prime yourself to crush the day, given the agenda you have, the number of companies you're involved in?
Coffee, that's number one. So I'm finally moved to drip coffee. To take the time to actually build the thing is hard. And Rob will attest to this one for sure. And then it's this news thing. And the third part is to, when I drive to the office or drive to a meeting or what have you, no calls. The first one, no calls.
No calls in the car.
In the car. Just you, the car, the music. The music can be whatever. It doesn't matter. It has to be something light. It can be metal, for example. Something light, but just you in the car. You look at surroundings around you and people going to work and just be in the moment, sort of.
Is that your meditation in the car?
So I don't like the word meditation, but yes.
Do you have a mindfulness practice, or is that
no? Just I'm a car guy. I love driving, so to me, it's connecting with the car and not meditating to the car per se.
What about pivoting at the end of the day away from work to family time? What are some things you do? What's a practice, a ritual to make sure you're there in the moment?
So pivoting away from this job is very hard. We have our iPhones, we have constant emails and all that stuff coming through. And as you know, we are a global platform. So when people wake up, I'm trying to go to sleep. And that sort of all meshes in. But I have a young family. So when they're out, there are no electronics, no devices around you, around them, around me. And it's purely conversational. And that's the detox I eat every day.
This is an every night thing.
Every night thing. And
at a certain time you do.
Well, there's also the car part, which is the meditation by emotional cars. And then there's the children and the family and just off screens.
Okay.
And the third part is gardening.
Is what?
Gardening.
Gardening. So, nice.
Yes.
Fruits, vegetables, flowers?
No, I don't like fruits and vegetables because then squirrels eat them. So it's more flowers.
They eat my fig all the time.
Yes. So it has to be flowers. It has to be things I can look at and be proud of that I built them. And so I build a rose garden on one side. I'm building a plumeria garden on the other side. Nice. And I have pines growing in the back of the house.
Nice.
Yeah.
Last question, book recommendations.
So the books that blew my mind were Stephen Hawking's books, which sort of try to prove to you that you are one tiny thing, a tiny atom if you look at the entire solar system.
I love it.
And if you go beyond that. And so the concept of wars seems childish to me, for example, because we are this tiny thing that even look from the moon, it's about that big. And if you go even further to Saturn, it's even smaller. And anything can go wrong. So why fight?
All right. Genuinely appreciate it. It's been a pleasure this whole time. Been great to know you, so I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Rock and roll. Cool. That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to zeroeyes.com/Nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.